Okay, greetings everyone. Today we will have a conversation about fieldwork with a focus on beginnings and endings. Our guest, Dr. Lydia Medland, will share with us some of her experiences of doing fieldwork in Morocco. Dr. Lydia Medland is a multidisciplinary researcher at the University of Bristol, focusing on waged work in agriculture. Her research investigates intersecting inequalities in the food system and the ways in which food workers are valued and undervalued. She has carried out research in Morocco and in Spain and is now focusing in the UK context. She has a PhD and a master's in global political economy from the University of Bristol. She is now a British Academy postdoctoral fellow working on an exploratory new project, working for 5 a day. Brilliant. Welcome, Lydia, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Karina. It's really, really lovely to be here with you.
Excellent. Shall we start?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, brilliant. So before we start, this is a coffee conversation. So for those who are watching this video, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, and join us. Okay, Lydia, so can you please tell us a little bit of your fieldwork in Morocco, please?
Yeah, so I started to do a PhD in 2014, following a master's in 2013 on the same topic. And my project was called Picking Europe's Tomatoes. It was a question to see who was really doing the work to help us get our kind of fruit and veg year round. And that took me to Morocco, because increasingly a lot of our fresh fruit and veg is grown not just in Spain and Italy and France during the winter months, but also on the other side of the European border. So I was quite curious about what exactly is going on there. We know a lot about the fields of plastic in the southern Spain, but we know less about to what extent people are working in good conditions, what the workforce looks like, what the production system looks like in Morocco. So I started from curiosity, really.
All right. Okay, so what were the challenges of doing fieldwork in Morocco? What are the languages they speak? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. So the big challenge was language, and the linguistic situation in Morocco isn't really clear. It's complex. There is classical Arabic is widely spoken, and is the official language, classical Arabic. But on the ground, people speak Darija, which is a kind of dialect, but some people would argue it's so different to be recognised as a language, of Moroccan Arabic. And then there's French, which is spoken by upper classes and people who have been quite highly educated, but it's also the second language for many people at school. So they learn French. Many people are familiar with French. And then there are the indigenous languages, the different variants of Amazigh. So there's Tamazight, there's Shelha, there's the Rifia. There's several indigenous languages, which would be the first language of many of the workers I wanted to talk to.
And how did you prepare for all those?
Because so first of all I had to work out, well, what am I going to do here? Am I just going to speak in English and hire translators, or am I going to become a fluent French speaker? And this was starting from a point of speaking a tiny bit of French, but not really. But I'd done some language learning before, and I had been quite successful with Spanish. So I thought, why not have a go? I've got 4 years. What am I going to do with my 4 years? Like, am I really just going to read books all the time? I'll go to a language school, have a go. So I decided that as the sort of language on TV and the radio, I'd have a go with Moroccan Arabic.
Okay.
So I tried to learn Moroccan Arabic.
Okay, so you conducted your interviews in Moroccan Arabic?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yourself, with no translator? Okay. How were those were there like live stories, like in-depth interviews? How long did they last?
So the interviews, I mean, what I should say is I spent 4 months or 3.5 months in a language school in a different city to where I did research the year before. So I went for 4 months to Morocco to learn, just simply to learn the language, to learn Moroccan Arabic. And then I went back the following year to do research. So I didn't just kind of pick up a phrase book. I really, really studied. I had to learn letters, and it was quite grueling, but also an amazing opportunity to find out more about the culture, I learned everything about, you know, Morocco in this language school. I could ask my teachers anything. So any questions that I had about migration in Morocco, minority religions in Morocco, attitudes towards divorce in Morocco, anything I could ask my teachers. And that was a really valuable, safe space before going anywhere near my research context, where it began to matter how I were perceived and you know, what I knew. And, you know, so I didn't put my foot in it really. So that was a beautiful, safe space. So if anybody's thinking about going to a country and learning a language that's not familiar to them, I really, really, really recommend language schools, or just a language teacher, somebody that becomes a friend of that, a friend and a mentor of a kind of journey into a context.
And perhaps also, if possible, going beforehand, right? Like you did.
Yeah.
I think from what you're saying, I think that was key, because as you said, it's not only about the language, but also about the culture, and in particular cultures, religion obviously is very important. So you really need to have the more context, the better, of course. So in this case, because we're talking about beginnings and endings in fieldwork, I would like to know, besides the language challenge, any other challenge, logistical challenge, or whatever other challenge that you faced before going on fieldwork?
There were lots of challenges. I think that it's always a process of arrival, feeling like you're welcome. And so you want to feel welcomed by the academic community, by a local community, maybe by an NGO community, maybe by a household. So the stages of finally feeling comfortable in a new place, I think, is really quite long, and different areas of that were challenging for me at different times. And yeah, and I think that maybe with hindsight, it's naive to think that everybody is going to welcome you with open arms all at the same time, all at once.
Right.
On the day that your aeroplane arrives, and you're not going to be sitting in a hotel,
Right.
at least for some time, waiting for some of that to happen. So I did spend, you know, a couple of weeks in a hotel, just kind of going, how do I find a house, and how do I check that it's okay for me to go where I want to go? And yeah, so it was, I think it was just having patience, and also taking steps forward when the time felt right, and not waiting for the perfect time.
Right. I think from what you're saying, I think it's quite important to be patient, but also, as you said, have very realistic expectations about what you can encounter, and be aware that you know, not everybody will be there to welcome you and be open to be a part of your research. I guess that's also very, very important, depending on the research. Lydia, I remember in previous conversations with you, you were talking about a very interesting concept about, you know, and that's how these the idea of this conversation emerged, about beginnings, the middle of the fieldwork, and the ending. And you were saying something about that I think is quite true, that we don't realize when we're in the middle of the fieldwork until we are kind of past that stage. Can you please elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I think for me, there was I was often waiting. I was waiting for my language skills to be better. I was waiting to do some amazing workshops with an NGO and with another NGO and with 4 NGOs, and I was waiting for kind of these perfect scenarios to happen. And what happened was that you know, the workers during the time frame got busier. The NGOs had their own projects on. There was maybe more tension in the region just for other reasons. There was some crime and so forth. And so the climate wasn't right to sort of hold some festival-like workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I felt that I was still preparing, really, I was in the middle of my research, and at some point it dawned on me, I just need to do some interviews. I just need to do some interviews, and it was in a way a disappointment not to do. I did one workshop, which was lovely, but in a way it was disappointing not to act out this beautiful plan I'd come up with, participatory methods in different settings. And I just had to do some interviews, and they were what they were, and yeah, it wasn't anything special, but that was my experience.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can completely relate to that, and I think perhaps this relates more to this to more ethnographic fieldwork, right? Because when we do this thing of you know, immersing yourself in whatever space you're doing your fieldwork, it's true that we get so caught up with the idea of precisely immersing yourself that you forget that you are there to do something. In particular, in my case as well, I realized that, oh my God, it's a month and I don't have interviews. So in terms of, again, going back to the topic about beginnings and endings, just to finish with the beginnings, any other advice or recommendation before researchers go on fieldwork?
I mean, I think it's really important to contact and talk to, if possible, and certainly read the work of other researchers who've been to the context you're aiming to go to, and that might be the same if you're, you know, if your context is on your doorstep. Just talk to other people who have done similar research, especially in the same place, in the same town, and you know, even if that's the same town where you live, because it's important to learn from their insights, learn from their mistakes and their lessons, but also just to make sure that your work's compatible with theirs, so that if they're going into depth in one particular area, perhaps you could give them some space, or, you know, to just have that negotiation a little bit, so that you can work as best as possible to, you know, be friends, not competitors. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so moving on, actually, how to move on from fieldwork?
How to move on? I mean, I'm still writing about it. Do we ever move on? I mean,
that's a very good philosophical question.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think that I think for those people about to go and research, I would say write notes about what is happening now. You know, okay, you might have your philosophical ideas, but also write notes about what's happening. Somebody said I have to move out tomorrow. Somebody says somebody wants to buy all my kitchenware from me. You know, even things that feel very simple, very mundane. Today I was invited to a party. I felt intimidated because I don't have the right dress. Whatever it is.
Sorry, can I stop you there? Because I'm thinking about our diary, right? Your research diary. Yeah. Are you suggesting something besides this, like your research or your film?
I'm suggesting that you write in your research diary what happened, not just what you, not just your academic ideas.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because, and I say it because I also wrote a research diary, like an ethnographic diary of my language learning 2 months, or no, sorry, 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back to them, they were really not very good at all. They weren't good. They weren't good to write from, because they were all about my ideas, and I couldn't go back to them and use them as evidence or as examples of my language learning process, because I hadn't written about my language learning process.
Right.
Whereas I could have written, oh, today I learned how difficult it is to conjugate verbs, you know, then I could have talked about that later, about the difficulty of the language learning process, but I couldn't do that because I hadn't written what I was doing. And I also think it's useful to keep different diaries for different things. So maybe an ideas diary and maybe a what's happening today diary.
Right. And I'm thinking about your blog. I don't remember if did you create your blog?
Yeah.
When you were in your fieldwork or afterwards? And I remember reading one of your posts about making bread. That was brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit this blog, please?
Yeah, I got on the plane to Morocco, and I arrived, and 2 weeks later I thought, I need to communicate with my friends and family. And I don't need to tell them my research findings, but I do need to express what's going on, and sort of begin to just share some thoughts and ideas. And yeah, I just would, it's focused on food because I'm interested in food. So I'd take an item like bread, and I'd noticed in the bread example, I'd just noticed how women make bread from scratch in Morocco. And I'd seen middle class women make bread from scratch, and I'd seen very, very poor women who were very overworked make bread from scratch. And I'd seen daughters who were in their teens making bread from scratch. And I just wanted to talk about, wow, I'm amazed. There's all this bread being made from scratch. It's a time commitment. It's something that we've forgotten about. We just go and buy bread from the shops, and it wasn't a great research finding. It's not in my thesis, as Lydia has noticed that women make bread from scratch. It's not a big thing, but it was just something I wanted to share. Wow, here, you know, let's think about bread some more. And it's interesting because in lockdown, suddenly we've started making bread from scratch, and you know, many people have returned to that art. So it was just something I was noticing, and the blog was wonderful for me at the time, just to feel like I had a connection to my community.
We definitely felt that connection. I felt like I knew, you know, the place a little bit more. Sometimes it's like, you know, I think you included a picture and everything, and that definitely communicated something more than just, hi, I'm fine. But I was thinking, Lydia, that perhaps that blog, regardless of the topic, you know, as mundane as it could be, I think because you have written a lot about these things that might seem unrelated to your thesis, or as you said, like mundane, and probably nobody cares about it. But I'm pretty sure when you read all these entries and you put them together, definitely they tell a story that is, I would say, that is relevant, at least in the methodology section, at some point in, you know, in the reflexivity section, that is quite valuable because we tend to forget. So do you think that this particular blog and your research notes and your field diary, I don't know, do you think, you know, that could be the best strategy, to write as much as you can?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we're working on a PhD project, there is a reality that we have to write a thesis.
Yeah.
So at some point we have to become authors. And I think that making friends with the writing process, you know, just getting used to writing online, in a journal, on notes, however it is, I think just getting used to writing taking the anxiety out of writing is a really important thing to do. So I think it can be useful for dealing with your own thoughts, sharing, as like with the blog, sharing with friends, ideas and reflections, and just giving yourself permission to write. Because and that it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, it's your friends reading it, or maybe nobody's reading it. But I think the undergraduate sort of part of university trains us to write in a really restricted way, where we're always talking about somebody else or something else, and actually finding our own voice is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So now, talking about the endings, what were your detachment strategies or the tools? I mean, I don't know if you were actually at that point you were, you know, self-conscious about, you know, detachment, but what can you recommend researchers to detach from fieldwork?
Well, I think it's difficult. I mean, one thing I recommend is this book, which I brought along with me, called Development Fieldwork, A Practical Guide. Right. And it's got there's a chapter on leaving the field, which I read as I was leaving the field, and I found very helpful. And then I think later, when we begin to come back and look at it all again and go, hang on a minute, I said lots of women make bread. Do they really? You know, kind of, we start to be critical again, and we go, maybe I was wrong actually, or maybe I was just being a bit silly, or, you know, maybe I've got nothing to say. And we kind of just go back into the sort of, we detach. I think it's really important to keep some sort of creative focus, creative process, where we allow ourselves to carry on thinking and to just carry on going between our voice and other people's voices. So it's like, I've developed my narrative voice, I can write a blog, I can speak about what I've seen, but now I'm not there and I'm not so confident with what I'm writing about. I need to balance other people's kind of perspectives with my own, but not lose my own either. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Completely, yeah, that makes sense. Speaking about the endings as well, something very important that we rarely see in academic texts. I mean, we are seeing more and more, but usually we don't, about emotions and feelings. In your case, I don't know if you can share with us some of your coping strategies to cope with any sort of emotion or feeling, because obviously you cannot avoid them when you are in fieldwork, especially when you are in such a different culture, speaking a different language. So what can you recommend researchers to do to cope with emotional challenges?
I mean, I think we are in the process of sort of recognizing how big, you know, we're in a sort of mental health revolution in general, aren't we? So I think, you know, there are a lot of opportunities to take advantage of counselling by the university or elsewhere. But I think most important to me has been the community that we've had, where we can check in with one another and like you've just said about my blog post, you know, kind of go, oh, you did write something interesting. And I thought, oh, did I? Great. Okay. And we remind each other, we put our work back in context. So I think, you know, it's been really important to me to keep not just in my own world, but to read other people's work, read friends' work, you know, that isn't connected, and create those spaces which aren't too critical, where we just listen to what each other are sharing and talking about. And yeah, for me, creativity is really, really important. So sometimes I will just draw a picture of what I'm thinking about or what the challenge. Sometimes I'll draw a picture of it and it's a mountain. I mean, my thesis has been a mountain. My thesis has been a star. My thesis has been a painting. It's been lots of things, and and those are my expressions of emotion as well, because, you know, maybe if I am feeling like the whole thing was a disaster and then I put it onto paper, then that allows it to go through this transformation where I go, okay, well, it wasn't all a disaster. I can take this bit and I'll just work with this bit, and then I can turn it into a chapter or something. I just try and keep moving, even if that feels a bit silly, to turn my theory chapter into a star because it's got 5 points or something. That's what it was. It was a star.
That sounds really fun, actually. And can you please tell us a little bit of clowning?
Yeah, I mentioned at another session that I did quite a lot of clowning when I came in the year after fieldwork, and that is just, it's a kind of state of play. There's a conscious clowning. It's the movement in Bristol, and I must credit my teacher, Holly Stoppett, and she just encourages people to enter into a state of play and a state of permission, where you've got permission to be brilliant and you've got permission to be rubbish, and that permission is really wonderful. And and that helps kind of just drop into the emotions. And when I suddenly realized one day I was just very unhappy in my office, and so I went, you know, I don't have to stay here. I can change. I can go and sit somewhere else. And you know, that kind of insight can come from just a more a state of more permission, and where you give yourself more permission to just play. So yeah, it was just a bit like going to a yoga class, apart from, instead of doing stretches, dancing around the room, sort of dancing to music. You know, it's just an outlet for me. Clowning was one of the strategies of just having fun after quite an intense experience.
Oh, that I bet that must have been really, really fun, and quite, I guess, liberating as well, because you know, when we're doing a PhD, everything is so serious, and you know, supervision meeting after supervision meeting, and then we have all these presentations, so everything's so formal, and we have to, you know, be so confident all the time. So I guess that must have been quite liberating, just to be yourself and to be allowed to be rubbish.
Yeah, just be allowed to be rubbish.
Say, or don't say what people, you know, expect you to say, or to be even. Yeah. Okay, Lydia, we're almost done, but before we go, I really would like to finish this interview with you, or this coffee conversation, with you sharing a little bit of your wisdom with us about the PhD life, because most of the people who is part of our project are starting the PhD, and we all know, and this is something a little bit frustrating, because one way or another, well, yeah, it's a difficult experience, but it should not be that stressful. It should not be. I remember at the beginning of our PhD, somebody said that doing the PhD was a very lonely experience, and I didn't feel that way, because fortunately we had our community. But before we go, do you have any advice for those who are starting the PhD?
Yeah, I think make lots of connections, because they will serve you. You know, like I say, listening to other people's PhD projects, talking to them about yours, really looking for those kind of supportive relationships that are going to be there throughout, hopefully, is really important. And I have needed boundaries on my time. Weekends also apply to you. You know, it's really, really important to have time off, and to yeah, to have time off, to take weekends, to not allow the PhD to consume your entire life. And, you know, maybe it will for an intensive few months or, you know, an intensive period, but it's so important to have time off and not allow it to be your whole world. It's just a PhD. So yeah, I feel very privileged to have got through it, and I know I'm lucky, and I'm really, really lucky to have friends like Karina and others who I've spent this journey with. But yeah, don't let it be your whole world.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, and hopefully we can see you again at some point in the future to talk about more about your future projects, what you're doing now, because I'm sure you have a lot of things to share specifically about fieldwork too. Thank you very much for all the people watching.
Thanks, Karina. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye from Bristol.
Bye.
Bye.